What's up, Ben?
What's up, Jared?
How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic and excited for episode.
Number 6, I think it is.
We don't even know what episode we're on of the Connect podcast. If you are tuning in, we're so glad that you are here. We are Ben and Jared of the Connect Youth at Woman Methodist, and today we want to get real about some stuff with you. But firstly, in world news,
The Evergreen.
The Evergreen-
Suez Canal.
here's what I want to know. Ships have been going through the Suez Canal for 150 years. How did he do it?
I have no clue yet. Rumor has it there was a bit of a failure on one of the engines and it turned. The other one was there's a massive desert storm and this thing is like 400 meters. So they couldn't see where they were driving and they crashed into the bank.
Super. I have heard the wind theory that the wind literally blew them off course because it was so powerful. So here, what happened, if you don't know, Evergreen, which is a Japanese, I believe, shipping, like transport company, was going through the Suez Canal. Now, if you know about the Suez Canal, it is the gap at north of Africa. So if you want to get to Asia from like England or America, whatever, you have to go around the bottom of Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, which is super long, or you go straight through the Suez Canal. And this ship turned in the Suez Canal and literally blocked the whole canal.
It's a crazy story.
And they stopped. So 12.5% of all the world shipping traffic goes through that canal. And they blocked that thing for days, costing the world economy literally billions.
It was literally like $400 million an hour.
That's wild. And it was literally like one pilot's mistake.
Well,
Okay.
technically.
We don't really know. We don't really know what happened. But that is wild.
It is a crazy, crazy thought.
It was super exciting. I enjoyed it.
It was something quite interesting because it was like out of the blue.
Yeah, out of the blue, and then suddenly the whole world was like, their eyes were suddenly on like North Africa.
The memes have been insane around it though.
My favorite meme is definitely the Evergreen truck that blocked the highway
Oh my
in
gosh.
like China somewhere.
I was dying with laughter at that. But speaking of dying of laughter, we want to know, this is going to be the first question. What is the funniest story around a sports tour or camp that you've had?
Oh man, talking of blockages. Okay, this is bad. I don't know if I can do this on a podcast. I really don't know, but I'm just gonna go. We can cut it out and post if it's not okay. Okay, so I'm at kids camp. I'm like 10 or 11 kids camp, and
So this is tiny barefoot Benjamin that runs around everywhere.
Yes, that's him. And we go to talk. I live in Stotterdam. We go to Tarkastad for youth camp. It's Abby's dad runs this big youth camp on a farm. And they have one farmhouse, which has 2 bathrooms. All the girls sleep in the farmhouse. And they put all the boys in the sheep shed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, dude, it was real.
So
and
you
then
really got to experience what it was like to be Jesus.
dude, we were in the shed. It was amazing. And we used to just wake up at like 2 a.m. and someone would shout, pillow fight. And we would all just start a massive pillow fight, but no one could see anything because it's pitch black on the farm. Anyway, so we get there day one, and they've got a porta potty for like, I don't know, 50, 60 boys sleeping. They've got one, and they've just, like, they haven't dug a hole for it. They've just put like a container. And after day one, that container was full. And now I haven't pooped yet. I haven't pooped since I arrived at camp. So boys are just going like, they're going to go into bushes, right? So boys are like jumping farm fences. They're going off into the bushes. They're grabbing some TP, and they're going for it. And I still haven't pooped yet. And then they make an announcement. They're like, guys, you guys can't go poop in the bushes. Like, this is a working farm. People are going to like walk in it. You aren't allowed to do that. So I, being super obedient Ben, don't poop in the bushes. There's no way I'm pooping in that porta potty because it's full. Like, if you sit on the seat, your butt touches the water. And the camp is 4 days long.
Oh, no.
So for 4 days, little Ben does not poop. I just remember the last night they had a massive bonfire. Like, they were burning whole trees. And they fed us like boerewors rolls. And I remember taking one bite of my boerewors roll, and it like hit my stomach. And my stomach was like, no, you're full. Like, there's no way I was eating anything. And then there was a 3-hour bus trip home the next day. And I just got home and I sat on the toilet for like 2 hours. Like, it was brutal, man.
That is so wild.
So that's talking about being blocked. But if you want to hear the craziest, so this is a sports story. This is just poop story day today. Oh man. Okay. I don't know if people are gonna still let me pass to them after this, but here's the deal. So I asked this question. What's your craziest poop story to my home group when I was at ministry school? And we had this one guy, Jason Hall. Jason, if you ever listen to this, forgive me for sharing your story. He's now a drummer for Bethel Music, but when he was like a teenager, him and his friends were in a band together. And so they did like a band tour around their home like state in America, and they had like 12 stops to do over a weekend, and their final stop was like 20 hours away from home.
Cheapers.
But the guy whose combi they borrowed said you need to have the combi home like on Monday morning first thing, because they had to go somewhere. So they do their final gig, they jump in the combi, and now they've literally, like, it's 20 hours away, and they've literally got 20 hours to make the trip. So they don't stop, they just go. And then the final couple hours of the trip, and one guy really needs to poop. He's like, guys, I've got to go, we need to stop. Oh, dude, you know the pain. And so the driver's like, there's no way we're stopping.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to stop. We've got to keep going. And eventually he's so desperate, so the one guy says, just go out the window.
No, you lie.
So he's sitting in the front row of the combi, right? There's two more rows behind him. They don't warn the rest of the combi. He drops his pants, puts his butt out the window, and he just lets fly. I don't know if you've ever driven a car, but you know what happens? The wind whips it into the back window, and it plastered the guy's face. So he throws up immediately. Like, he just throws up on the spot, not out the window, in the combi. Then the driver of the combi can't see someone throw up without throwing up, so he throws up. And then there's like 5 oaks in the combi. Everyone throws up. Eventually they just...
It's just like, it would have been better for him to just go and stop.
There was poop. There was like vomit. He said when they got home, they literally just hosed the inside of the combi and everyone off. They just hosed.
What a wild story.
Dude, it's not good to block things, man. You've just got to flow. That's the point.
Let it go. So the question we want to ask you is, again, what is your funniest sports tour or camp story that you have? Share this with your group. So what we want to talk to you guys today about is we want to speak about kingdom community. Just like in Ben's story, those guys were in a community together. And often community gets messy, community gets wild, but community is great. And so, Ben, we want to dive into 1 Corinthians 12. And there's this amazing image that Jesus gives about community. Well, I think it's Paul, isn't it?
Yeah, Paul's writing Corinthians. And it's really cool because he says, for as one body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so is Christ. So basically what he's saying is like one body has many parts.
Yeah.
But it all makes up one body. And he's talking to the church because the church at that time is like super diverse. You've got Jews, you've got Romans, you've got Greeks, and they're all coming together in this melting pot of like different cultures and religions and age groups and backgrounds, and they're all coming together as one church. And he's saying, guys, we're all different, but we all have a part to play. And he says, for in fact, the body is not one member, but many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear should say, because I am an eye, I am not of the body, because I am not an eye, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole body were hearing, where would be the smelling? But now God has set the members of each of them in the body just as he pleased. And so the point is, like, everybody, like, our body needs a Jared.
Yeah.
Our body needs a Carl, it needs a Jared Jr., like it needs Benjamin. Our body needs you, to the person listening. Like, you play a part of this body, and if you disqualify yourself because you're not that thing, or you disqualify someone else because they don't look like you don't understand that Jesus made this body for everyone.
And it's so interesting that in the scripture, it directly addresses comparison. Because it can be so easy to look at like Abby, who's amazing at worship, and like for me, who can't sing and is tone deaf, and be like, oh my goodness, there's no like worth for me because I can't sing. Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, I often find myself in that boat because people put a greater weight on preaching than in other roles at the church. And so people often feel like they should be on stage preaching. Yeah. And I think everyone's called to preach. So I'm not saying you shouldn't preach. But what I'm saying is that, like, if it wasn't for the dude mixing sound at the back, or
Yeah.
if it wasn't for the person who led worship, and if it's not for the dude that plays the electric guitar, like this whole thing wouldn't happen. And that's just in a church service. But it's so much bigger. Like, I'm so grateful we've got people that are good with finances.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful we've got people that are good at building community. Like,
And
we need
Lord
all of it.
favors those that do admin.
Oh, praise Jesus. But really, it's like the fact we have to be okay with this body, it's diverse. One of my favorite quotes is, unity is not uniformity.
Yeah.
And if we all look the same, that's uniformity. But unity actually requires you and me to be different, to have different opinions, different views. But therefore, we have unity despite our difference, because we gather around one central thing, and that's Jesus. And our community needs to be gathered around Jesus.
Yeah, and I think that leads into the two takeaways that we want to give you today. So the first one we want to speak about is the community of the kingdom is diverse.
Yeah.
I mean, it says it in Psalm 139 that you are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
Like, there's a uniqueness about you, and there's something that you carry that's vital to the kingdom. Like, if it wasn't for that thing that you carry inside of you, there's going to be like no Benjamin to be able to express the love of Jesus.
Yeah.
Or the image of Jesus that is uniquely made in Benjamin.
And the crazy thing is, I can watch other people do something I do really well. Like, one of my favorite preachers is Robert Madu.
Yeah.
And if I watch Robert Madu preach and I try preach like Robert Madu, the problem is Robert Madu is already got a Robert Madu. We don't need another Robert Madu. We need a Benjamin.
Yeah.
And so you can't look at someone else and say, I want to be like them. You can want to be like them in character, and you can want to be like them in like hunger and spirituality, but you can't try do what they do, because you're not meant to do what they do. You're meant to do what you do.
Yeah. And there's literally so many different things that make us so unique. I mean, you can literally just talk about your background. We come from different backgrounds. We come from different races. We come from different genders. We come from different economic backgrounds. We come from different educations. And there's so many more things that we can just look at in our backgrounds. Like, you can look at your upbringing, your past, the way you're wired, whether you can look at Enneagram as a way to establish like the type of personality that you have.
Yeah.
Like, there's these things that keep telling us we are so different. And it can often like cause that bit of a split within us of like, oh my goodness, like, where do I actually fit in?
And it's crazy. We're in this time in the world right now where the world is saying there's no difference between male and female. You can just blur those two lines. But then they're saying there are differences between sexes and your sexual orientation. And like, the world is in direct conflict, and they're really questioning identity right now. And so this is a time in the world right now when we need to get close to Jesus, and we need to be secure in our identity outside of the people around us and outside of what their opinions are, the world's opinions, you know? And so we need to get close to Jesus. But that actually, like, I get my identity from my community. And yes, my identity comes from Jesus, but often I inherit that identity through my community. So the question is, like, are you in a community that's affirming your identity in a positive way?
Sure.
To become more like Jesus, you know? So you get lots of identity from your parents. And yeah, they messed up often, and there's some bad things that we get from them, but they affirm identity in us. And then our Christian community, like, are they affirming our spiritual identity? That's so important.
Yeah. And I think the thing I love about diverse communities is there's so many things that are different about us. Like, you just look at South Africa, we have like 11 different languages.
It's beautiful, man.
And we get to really experience like this explosion of just life, wonder, and beauty that God created inside each and every single one of us.
And what a gift. Like, what a gift that there's people that grew up in different homes and speak different languages.
Yeah.
Like, that's a unique experience. I was in America for multiple years, and most people there speak English just by growing up, because the whole country is English. And there are some people that speak Spanish or whatever, but most of the time you aren't interacting with someone that speaks a different language. But yeah, we've got 11 national languages. Like, just the beauty of that. It comes with challenges.
Yeah.
But man, it's beautiful because we get to choose unity.
So we want to ask you a question here. This is going to be the first question is, what do you enjoy about being in a friendship group or in a church community?
That's a really good question. And I think a really great follow-up question to that is, like, how have you seen that community impact you and change your and influence your identity.
So the second takeaway we want to leave with you guys is that the heart of God is not to make us uniform, but unified.
Yeah. What does that mean?
It means that he doesn't want us, everyone having the same gifting, the same talents, the same personality, the same like biological structure,
Yeah.
like the same build. Because I can't be built like you, bro.
I'm sorry, man.
It's just tough.
It's hard.
It is real.
I understand your pain.
But the reality is God wants to make us united. He wants us to come together.
Yeah.
And our common point of becoming united is in Jesus.
Yeah, that's really good. And there's only one thing that will ever satisfy that we can come, because the church did this. Here's what the church did. There was only one church, really. That was the Holy Roman Catholic Church. And they kind of got religious. So you had people break away from that, like Martin Luther. He went and he was like, you can't buy your salvation. You can't buy your salvation through indulgences. Salvation is free by grace. And he then split away and they formed the Lutheran Church. Now what happened is John and Charles Wesley they were Anglican priests. They started the Anglican movement. They were part of the Anglican movement. But because it was growing so quickly and they allowed women to preach, the Anglicans were like, you can't do this. So they left the Anglican Church and they started the Methodist movement. And so what happens in church history is every time we disagree, we split and we cause these factions of the church, and that's called denominationalism. And that's not the heart of God. The heart of God is that even in our disagreements, we would choose one another because of Jesus.
Yeah.
And Paul puts it this way. Paul is like, I'm the most qualified. I'm a Jew. I'm a Roman citizen. And he names the people that he studied under. And he's like, if anyone is qualified, it's me. But I put that all behind me for the greatness of knowing Jesus Christ.
Sure.
And it's like, am I willing to put my differences aside, my disagreements aside, my theology aside for the greatness of knowing Jesus Christ and Jared Heidenreich?
Yeah. Wow. That's really, really powerful. And I just want to highlight one scripture. It's just Colossians 1, verse 16 to 17. And it says, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things are held together.
That's really good. The tough thing about this is when we choose to be a part of a community, I don't, like, when Jared offends me, I don't get to just peace out because I've chosen. So when I choose to be part of the community, I'm choosing to be uncomfortable over building resentment.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose to say to Jared, when you did X, Y, and Z, it made me feel like this.
Yeah.
Because that conversation is uncomfortable and awkward. But because I want relationship with Jared, I'm going to choose the uncomfortable and the awkward. Otherwise, this resentment over Jared treating me X, Y, and Z keeps building up in my heart.
Yeah.
And I never have the conversation, which means that the only solution I have left is I've got so much resentment as I leave the community.
Yeah.
We found that a part of the church again and again and again, people will only be there as long as everyone else keeps them happy, but they're never willing to confront people that are hurting them or causing them issues.
Yeah. And I think the problem with that is you keep jumping from place to place and community to community, but never really getting to experience real, authentic love and friendship.
And the net result of that is 10 years later, you've been through 5 different churches and you say, the church has hurt me, the church is a failure, and you leave your relationship with Jesus Christ. Or you end up in some funny relationship where it's just like you by yourself reading your Bible and you've got no one keeping you accountable, no one checking up on you.
Yeah.
Because God created us to do this thing in community. Like, we have to ask the question, why did he put us on this planet?
Yeah.
Like, why did he decide, I'm going to give you guys 100 years to be on this planet and do what? Like, he could have just said, you guys can choose heaven or hell. But instead, he put us on this planet, and there has to be something that we're here to learn. And to me, that is how to be in community. Because if we can't be in community with each other, how are we ever going to be in community with the Trinity?
Yeah. And I think that's something important to highlight is the actual Trinity. Like, that is community in itself. It's Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God.
Yeah.
Like, there's something about community that God really, really values.
Yeah.
And you see that get echoed when Jesus comes to earth, when he comes and chooses his disciples. They're not like the most qualified. They're not the most... Some of them are actually really disliked.
Yeah, some of them were weird.
Yeah.
Like if you think of Matthew the tax collector, like he was disliked by everyone. And the other, like it must have been so weird for the other disciples to have Jesus say, this tax collector is a social outcast. He's going to be part of our community.
Yeah.
It's like those things, those are the people Jesus chose.
Mm. And the crazy thing about those people is they would often have debates among themselves about who would be Jesus' favorite in heaven.
Yeah. Yeah. They themselves were in conflict, but Jesus never, do you know what? He never criticized them for their desire to be great.
Yeah.
He just readjusted the way that they thought.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to have the desire to be great. But he readjusted. And then together, those 11 men changed the world.
Yeah. I mean, Thomas went from doubting to one of like the pillars of faith.
They reckon he was buried in India.
You rate?
They reckon he made it that far. All the way, on those days, they made it all the way to India.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And then you get Peter,
Yeah.
who doubted Jesus, denied him.
Denied him. He ended up being crucified upside down because he didn't feel like he was worthy to be crucified the same way as his Lord.
Yeah.
And you get Paul, the persecutor of the church.
He literally stoned, I think it was Andrew.
Yeah, he stoned, not Andrew, the first martyr. What's the name of the first martyr? Kyle? Name of the first martyr? He doesn't know. Oh, my goodness, how have we forgotten this?
I think it might be Andrew.
It's not Andrew. It's
Isn't
like
it?
Philip or... Don't know.
We'll
We'll
look
put
up.
this in the comments.
But it's crazy because all those people were messy.
Yeah.
And all of them let Jesus down at some point.
Yeah.
And yet Jesus still chose to be in community with them. Even look at Judas. Like the act of friendship that Jesus gave him by giving him the bread.
Yeah. Jesus is always reaching out in community, and it's so important. So we don't get to just run away from community, and we need to fight for community. It's hard work. Like any relationship's hard work, any friendship's hard work. It means confrontation, working on yourself, looking at yourself and seeing, what do I need to change?
Yeah.
How can I love you? It's laying down your life for other people, but knowing that they're willing to lay down their life for you.
Yeah.
And so you want to choose your community well. And then number two, like you aren't designed for isolation.
Not at all.
Isolation will literally kill you. There's this medical study they got to do on this 13-year-old girl who'd been locked in her bedroom since the age of 1 by her parents. Okay, her parents were pretty evil, but she'd never experienced community. And her emotional, mental, and every single part of her growth was severely stunted. She was like a 13-year-old trapped in the body of a toddler because she'd just never experienced community.
Sure. Yeah, and I think if you look at COVID last year, like, man, that was a bit of a killer of, like, the spirit. You saw so many people burn out. You saw a bunch of people in depression.
Yeah.
All because of that need for community.
It was brutal. We designed for hugs. We designed for deep conversations. We designed for intimacy. And it's like COVID has stolen so many of those things from us.
Yeah.
And so right now, actually, why we're talking about this is we're encouraging you this month of April, while we're not having youth group every week and we're not meeting in community, like, be intentional.
Yeah.
Pick up the phone and phone a friend. Talk about good, healthy things. Like, talk about the podcast. Talk about what Jesus is doing in your life. Don't just, like, sit by and let it happen, but be intentional about pursuing community, about pursuing deep relationships, and checking up on one another.
Yeah. It's so important that
Yeah.
you just get connection, because ultimately, like, we were designed to be around people.
For sure.
Yeah. So the questions we want to ask you are, the first one, what do you think are the benefits of community?
It's a really good question.
Second one, what do you think of the challenges of being in community? And
Can I tell you
third-
that? It's humans. Humans are the biggest challenge.
That's true. And third one, does your community or close circle build you up or pull you down?
Sure. Great questions.
So we figured out who the disciple is that got stoned first.
The first martyr ever in the Bible, in the New Testament, is Philip.
No, it's Stephen.
Oh, Stephen! I got it wrong again. Do you know who Philip was? Philip was the first person to be transported.
Really?
Yeah, he was traveling somewhere like a great distance and he was running, and the next instant he was there. The Spirit picked him up and transported him.
That's wild.
It's wild, bro.
But anyways, Ben, I heard it's like a really interesting time right now.
What time is it?
It is the
Big
big question segment.
Come on. What's the big question for today?
This week's big question comes in from a teen and says, I am a Christian and my relationship with Jesus is great, but I don't necessarily go to church very often. And I wanted to know, what is the value of being in community at church?
Wow. Sure. I love that your relationship with Jesus is great. That's amazing. However, the saying goes like, if you take a log out of the fire, it quickly burns out. But if you put a log in the fire, it quickly catches a blaze. And so I very rarely meet Christians outside of community who I genuinely feel like are on fire for Jesus. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying it's very rare.
Yeah.
And often what community does is they're like a mirror that show us our weaknesses and our faults. And if you're just by yourself, like I didn't know half the things that were wrong with me until I got married to Abby. Then all of a sudden I've got someone every day that's confronting the weakest parts of myself.
Yeah.
And had a choice to like grow and change and improve, or to stay like weak, you know? And if you're never in community, you could think you're doing great, but actually there's no one holding up a mirror to you and saying, this is how you're failing. This is where the sin is in your life, you know?
Yeah.
And what's the value of community? Well, Jesus created us for community. We spoke about the Trinity. He created the Trinity and he created us for that community. So for me, the biggest value of community is encouragement, like friendship, like godly friends, you know?
Yeah.
People that will pray for me and like fill me up, encourage me. Those things are so valuable in community. And then just like practically, when we left ministry school, like we've been in this bubble, like this Christian bubble for 3 years now.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing they reinforced into us is the moment you leave, get involved in a local church. And no church is going to be like the one that you've been a part of. But it's okay, just get involved in the local church. And so I came and worked at Warm Methodist within 2 months of leaving ministry school. And I saw myself compared to with my peers who then went home and then struggled to find a church and couldn't decide on a church. Like my relationship with Jesus stays strong, and immediately a whole bunch of them had an incredibly tough time, and it took them like 3 years to hit their stride again.
Sure.
So being in community is just, it's one of the biggest gifts. And so we don't go to church on a Sunday out of like religious obligation. We go because we know Jesus asked us to do this thing in community. Friday Night Youth is not just about the fun and the friends, it's actually about choosing community.
Yeah. And there's that big difference is like religion will tell you it's a structure and relationship tells you it's a choice.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So we get to actually choose who we want to be around. And when we choose those people, we've got to choose them. We've got to get, like you say, aggressive about choosing people.
Yeah. And actually, choosing people that are going to build into you and cutting out people that are not doing you favors. You know, you don't have to like hate them. You don't have to be mean to them, but you need to put up boundaries to protect and steward your community.
Yeah. And there's also that thing of like just showing up. Sometimes it can be really hard to just come to church, and it can be really hard to be in community. But sometimes showing up, like there's a reward in that itself. That's
really good. And that's really good place to land this episode, because we're not meeting this week as youth group at Connect. We're not creating a structure for your pod groups to meet, but we want to encourage you to choose community.
Yeah.
And whether that's like a quick WhatsApp call, whether you're going to set up a Zoom, or you're just going to message one another about what you've learned this week, do that and choose community. Be intentional. And when you come back together in person again for the first time, you'll see the depth and the strength that's created in you.
Yeah, that's so good. So we hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and we'll see you guys soon.
Also, forgive us for the poop stories. It was Jared's fault.